right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Download. I'm here with my good friend Travis Van Duzen, and I'm Cameron. And today we're going to be talking about another leadership topic about listening. Travis?
Yeah, one of the probably most important things we could ever learn about leadership is understanding that we must be good listeners to be a great leader. Thomas Edison put it this way: we must have two ears and one mouth, so we may listen twice as much as we speak. But here's the reality: most of us are not good listeners. In fact, I would say almost most leaders are not naturally good listeners. Most leaders are people they're the go-getters. They're the ones that are out there making things happen. So oftentimes they're honestly their first posture is not to listen.
Yeah, that's so true, Travis, because as leaders, we all have agendas. We all have things we need to get done. We get in our day-to-day grind, and we're so focused, we get that tunnel vision of things that we need to get done, and we simply just forget to listen.
Absolutely. So one of the important things for us to really kind of understand up front is that while a lot of leadership development is developing different skills and different strengths and kind of building, kind of a toolbox, I want us to understand first of all that learning to listen is it's not a skill. It is a discipline. Learning to listen is a discipline. It's something that we have to put into our lives. So a discipline is often something that when we first start to do it, it's not going to necessarily be received that well. It's going to be a little tough. So understanding first that this is not a skill. This is something that we have to sometimes force ourselves into doing before it comes more natural.
Yeah, Travis. So our first point that we want to hit on is understanding people precedes leading them. And what does this mean?
It means if you want to be more effective at connecting with people, we have to understand what their needs are, what their desires are, what problems they're facing, and we have to understand that we have to understand what's going on in their lives before we can just simply start leading them.
Yeah, and that only comes by listening. Simple things like meeting periodically with team members or groups of team members. Sometimes there's those lull moments within your work environment where, you might see a group of employees just hanging out, in the middle of, could be in between certain activities, or maybe there's nothing going on. And sometimes a simple just engaging into that discussion and just listening. What are they talking about? What are the vibes within that group? What's on their mind? What's the hot topic?
Yeah.
And then that's how you really learn more about your team and your organization, is simply just by listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of segues right into the second point here is listening is the best way to learn. First, the question we really want to ask you: are you an active listener? One of the things that we must learn as leaders is that we should always be in a posture of listening, no matter where we are, whether we are actively in a conversation with someone, or even if we are sitting in an office or sitting in a meeting and we're just listening to what's going on around us. We should always be in a posture of listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember during my time early on as a leader I've always started my meetings with not my agenda. It was, what are the concerns in the room? What are some things that people wanted to bring up? Because I wanted to make sure those items are addressed first before we proceeded to go through the agenda that I had.
Yeah.
And that made the environment so open. Over time, everyone started wanting to talk or simply just make comments. And that's how you really get that transparent relationship with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that kind of just pulls us right into point number 3. As listening can help us keep problems from escalating. Just like you just said, starting out your meetings with the other person's agenda, the other team member's agenda, often can allow you to find out things that are going on in your organization that are potential problems, they're potential issues. If you haven't been informed, if you haven't formed that habit of listening, you're going to have major issues of finding out what's really going on. And oftentimes what's going to happen is something's going to escalate in your organization or on your team, and you're going to be the last person to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just came through my mind, proactive listening.
Yeah.
Right. being a part of your organization, keeping a pulse of what is going on. Sometimes as leaders, there might be times we get disconnected with our teams because we're on conference calls, we're in meetings, we're just doing just busy work that we forget to engage in our teams and truly listen to them. And listening is probably the most valuable thing that I've learned through my leadership to do is, keeping your mouth closed and be quick to listen first.
Absolutely. And we want to listen because listening establishes trust.
Yep.
Listening builds trust, and it really, we don't have a relationship with people unless we have trust first. A relationship without trust is really not a worthy relationship to have.
Mm-hmm.
So the question we want to make sure is, how are we using our listening to build trust to the people around us? How are we intentionally listening to people so that people feel that they can trust us, that we build those relationships with those people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going to our next point is listening can improve the organization. Simply listening, as we mentioned earlier, can add a lot of value to our organization. It can go from a completely disengaged working group to a fully engaged working group where there's transparency, there's an open relationship, there is cross communication between you and your team, and people feel heard, because I think once people feel heard, they feel valued. And that's what our goal is as leaders, is not only to take care of the business and make money,
Yeah.
but it's really to value our teams, because that translates to other aspects of our organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we want to do here is, how do we become an active listener? So we got a couple of ideas and ways that you can become an active listener. And most of these things are very easy to apply to your life right now. And the first thing is, approach each dialogue with the goal to learn something. If we walk into every situation in our life and we have the understanding and the belief that every interaction we have with every person we interact with has the potential to teach us something, it is a life-changing ideology, a thought process. For so many years, I've caught myself walking into meetings, or walking into to church, or walking into different events that happen in my life, and not really thinking about, well, this person can teach me something. I go in with an attitude of, there's nothing they can show me, there's nothing they could give me. And oftentimes I've missed opportunities for growth. I mean, even with my own children, I have a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 1-month-old, and they're teaching me things that that they don't even really know they're teaching me, just through spending time with them.
Yeah, Travis. So here's another step I wanted to talk about on how to become an active listener: is stop talking and focus closely on the speaker. And I know that's very difficult to do, because sometimes when someone comes to your office or someone wants to talk to you, oftentimes we get distracted. There's stuff popping up on your phone, there's emails popping up on the computer. Sometimes you just have to turn over your phone, you have to close the computer and focus on the person. And I know that can become very challenging sometimes, because of course there are other priorities, but your people are really the most valuable asset within your organization. And everything that you do should be centered around your people. And so simply just listening to them, staying focused on them, you don't want to think about what you're going to say next. You want to make sure you're fully listening to them, so you get to the root of what they're trying to communicate to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a manager once that anytime you walked into his office and asked, can we talk or can we speak, he would actually close his laptop and just would look at you, and it really just communicated this just intentional, I'm listening to you. It's very hard to believe and trust that someone's listening to you when your eyes are on your computer, your phone, and it's going all over the place. It's nothing's going to fall apart in the 2 to 3 minutes that you're going to sit and focus on another person.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, if something's going to fall apart in that time zone, that time period, you've already got major issues.
Mm-hmm. I know for myself, when I was starting out in the industry, I used to go to my boss for certain things, and encounter different bosses. There's bosses that would actually listen to you, but then there's ones that would be distracted, and then I would not get any value out of them.
Exactly. So keeping this kind of going, open and guide the conversation. So what does that look like? What does it mean to open and guide the conversation? It really means that when you ask questions, don't ask yes and no questions. Don't ask closed-ended questions where it's just yes or no. Ask questions that will allow people the opportunity to share a broad answer to your questions. I mean, you want to make sure that you're not putting people into a box with your questions, giving them an opportunity to share their thoughts in making sure that it is something that could help you means getting beyond a yes no answer and allowing them to share their thoughts on different things. So that we have to be strategic about how we ask questions.
Yeah, and then you want to drill down to the details. I think this is very, very important, is, that we don't just listen to our team members and listen to what they have to say. It's important to ask questions, and we're going to talk about this in another podcast, is asking questions to drill down to the details. And I think that's so important, where you start asking directive specific questions to really drill down on what's the root cause of why this person's talking to you, or what their agenda is. I think that's very important. How could this simple questions like, tell me more about X, or how did you come to this conclusion, or how would this work, or why do you think that way, or just going down to the details. And not only that, it will show that you truly care as a leader.
Yeah, another thing you can do is be very, very, very clear with summarizing what you're hearing when you've asked the question. For example, if I was to ask Cameron a question and he was to give me an answer, the best thing I can do to ensure to let him know, hey, I'm listening to you, is say, hey, Cameron, you know what? This is what I heard you say, and repeat it back. And when you repeat it back, it's number one, confirming that we're on the same page in the conversation, but also letting you know, hey, I am listening to what you have to say. And that often will be a very impactful moment for a lot of people of realizing, okay, my leader is listening to me. My leader is attempting to connect and listen to what I have to say. And that's a key piece of winning people over is repeating back. Let me make sure I understand what you said. This is what I heard you say. When that's done to me, it makes me feel like the person who's listening on the other side is really, really trying to make a clear connection with me and wants to make sure that I'm being heard.
Yep. Another thing is encouraging with positive feedback. Sometimes someone that's coming up to you, they might lack confidence, or they might be unsure of bringing up certain things to you. But simply encouraging the person with positive feedback, showing your interest, or asking questions that show your interest, it goes really a long way. Thank you for bringing this up to me. It really helped me understand a little bit more about this. That's what's going to add value.
Yeah, absolutely. And just moving along is, listen for total meaning. What we're talking about here is really pay attention to not just what's being said, but also what's not being said. And I'm going to kind of understand this is kind of we have to watch the nonverbal communication that's happening. As this person's communicating to you, do they have a stance of frustration? Are they emotional in their response? Do they seem to be agitated? Are they happy in the way they're responding? These kinds of things are very clear cues we can take also on what is not being said. In fact, I've been in rooms before where the communication is actually what's not being said is actually what is more clear than what's actually being said. Someone could be trying to say, "Oh yeah, this is a great idea," but you can see what's not being said is not a different story. So oftentimes, if leaders are only listening to what's being said, but they're not paying attention to what's visually happening in front of them, oftentimes they'll miss potential cues that are coming that are nonverbal.
And then we have our final point on how to be that active listener. Is you want to pay attention to your responses and how you're responding. That's probably the most important on how we respond, and we don't just brush off the person, without actually actively listening means you're actually responding.
Yeah.
The way you respond is truly a part of the dialogue, and you want to show respect for the other person's point of view. There's going to be disagreements. There's going to things that you're not going to agree on with your team members, but you want to hear them out and respect their point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap this up, I've given you 8 solid points on how to engage through listening. I want you to take these 8 points as we've kind of listed them out here. I want you to take these 8 points and I want you to do a listening audit of yourself. How well do you use these tools that we just talked about? Just to review them very quickly, is approach each dialogue with the goal to learn something. Stop talking and focus closely on the speaker. Open and guide the conversation. Drill down to the details. Summarize what you hear. Ask questions to check your understanding. Encourage with positive feedback. Listening for total meaning. And number 8 is pay attention to your responses. Take these 8 things, and then I want what would be excellent for your own development would be take these 8 things and do an audit on yourself. Where do you stand currently with these 8 things? Where can you be more intentional moving forward that will help you be successful in listening? Because ultimately, really the first responsibility of a leader is to listen to the people. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think one of the things is, going back to there's value in listening. And you're going to see a shift once you start actually listening and being less worried about what you have to say. Oftentimes you want to be, as a leader, the last person to speak in the room. You want to hear what your team has to say, and that'll make your life in leadership so much easier.
Absolutely. Well, as always, we thank you guys so much for joining us for the Leadership Download. We thank you guys for trusting us with your time, trusting us with your valuable time. And we just ask you guys, if you found value in this content today, to this teaching today, that you would share it on whatever platform that you're watching this on. Like us, share whatever's appropriate for whatever platform you're watching us on. And we thank you guys, as always, for joining us, and we will catch you guys in the next podcast.
Thank you.